Well, I want to talk to you about amazing Jesus. I every time we take a single message from the Bible, but this time I just felt like I want to talk to you about a different, we'll say a Jesus that just knew how to move from one need to another. The Bible said that he is touched with the feelings of our infirmities. You see, the Bible said that the Word, that's Jesus, was made flesh and dwelt among us. So as the Son of Man, he knew every feeling that we would ever have. And he went about his business of 33 years, or actually only working 3 years, absolutely just meeting the needs. So that we're going to talk about how he did that today. He started out on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, where it talks about that. And it's very interesting that they were so amazed when they listened to him. Thousands of people. There might have been 5,000 people up there in that congregation. And they looked at each other and said, nobody ever spoke like that, did they? No, they didn't. Well, when he was through there, he was done. He was over. He came down from the mountain, and one day I was reading along and it said, and he met a leper. Can you imagine leaving all of those accolades, which he was receiving at the beginning, and he met a leper? And the leper said, if you would, you could heal me. Jesus said, I would. And he healed the leper. So it didn't make any difference to him whether it was 5,000 or whether it was one, because he was touched with the feelings of our infirmities. So then, okay, let's see what else about our amazing Lord. Well, he told the disciples to get in a boat, and he got into the boat himself, and he went down in the hold of the boat, and he was the Son of Man, and he got tired. So he was fast asleep. Well, there was a very, very boisterous storm that came up, and it was filling the boat. And so the disciples were frightened. They hadn't seen a storm just like this. You see, that storm was going to have intelligence. Now that sounds weird, doesn't it? Jesus made that sea. So they came and they said, we better wake up the Lord, because our boat is already full. And they were bailing out as fast as they could. And he said, Jesus, yes? And he said, you woke me up. Yes, Lord, you have to get up. Don't you care that we're going to perish? He said, there's this terrible storm. Don't you see the waters now beginning to come into the hold where you are? Jesus said, oh, you have little faith. Like he expected them to do something about it. Well, maybe they hadn't been around him long enough. And of course, Pentecost hadn't come yet when they were in charge. But right now, Jesus was in charge. He got out, and what did he do? He rebuked the waves. Now you say, didn't he do something more manual? No, he didn't need to. All he did was to rebuke. Now you don't rebuke something that doesn't have intelligence. So that storm, the demonic interference, was troubling those waters, the winds and the waves. And Jesus got up and rebuked it, stopped that. Now that, you see, he made those seas. He made those waters. He made that wind. He made it all. And they only responded because they recognized the voice. Amazing, amazing Jesus. All right, well, you would think after something like that, maybe they could go home. Jesus said, No, we're not going home. Well, what are we going to do now? You know, I got a wife, Peter probably said. No, I said, we're going down to Gadara. Gadara? Nobody goes to Gadara. That's no man's land. We hear terrible things about Gadara. Yeah, Jesus said that's why we're going. The disciples said, okay, down to Gadara we go. No sooner had they landed, and all of a sudden, and by the way, you should know that the waves got very, very boisterous just before they got to Gadara. Now that same devil said, I'm in charge of Gadara, and here they're coming to my land. Well, when they landed, here come leaping, naked, and just crazed and out of his mind. And he came, and he knew exactly where Jesus was. He was among the tombs, this boy was. He was among the tombs and the caves where they kept the dead people. And of course, death and demon possession, they go all together. And so here they come, and he leaped, and he fell right down at Jesus' feet and said, are you come to torment us before our time? Isn't that interesting? He didn't know what to say to Jesus. So he said, you're going to torment me. All I know is demon possession. I can't imagine anything else. And I think it'd be torment to be anything else. Well, you know what? Jesus said, what's your name? He said, well, my name is Legion. He said, 6,000 demons are in you. And Jesus commanded those devils to come out. And they did. And you know, the demons screamed and said, don't send us out of the land. And you know what? There was a whole crowd of pigs that were there, which represented the livelihood of Gadara. And they said, send us into the pigs. And one of the pigs went down into the river violently, and they all perished. Well, the next time Jesus came back by and say goodbye to the man, here was sitting, had his clothes on, and he was in his right mind. He said, Jesus, can I go with you? He said, no, go home and tell what wonderful things that God has done for you. He said, all right, I will. And he went home, told it, had a revival in Gadara, and the next time Jesus came through there, it said all the people received him gladly. Oh my, what an amazing Jesus, what amazing Jesus. Well, all right, we've been to Gadara. So where is this, let's just think where this he's going. Well, I don't know if this was in order or not, but there were 5,000 people that came out to see him one day. And Jesus and all the disciples said, send him home. It's getting late. The stores will be closed. Jesus said, give him something to eat. They said, give him something to eat. And they looked in their bag, and they didn't have very much, just a little bit of money, and they said, what? We couldn't hardly feed just a little tiny portion of them. No, we can't do that. So Jesus said, tell them to sit down in ranks. And all of a sudden, somebody coming up, one of the disciples, Philip, I think, and he said, you know, I've been casing the crowd, and we've got a boy here that's got 5 loaves and 2 fish. She said, oh, that will do just fine. So he received it from the little boy, and as he began to break the bread, and it passed through his hand, it began to multiply. And the disciples, he said, deliver it to the people. So they went out and by ranks, and before it was over with, they were all, the Bible said, filled. Nobody went home hungry. They weren't complaining anyway. It was the disciples that were complaining, but not the people. The people, they thronged to hear his words. And so when the day was over, it was over, and they could go home, and there was 12 baskets, and what they did with those leftovers, I don't know, but Jesus cared about the leftovers, and he didn't leave them over. He didn't leave them without sending them where they were needed. The next one I was going to mention is that Jesus, when he was through one day, he said, I must go through Samaria. Oh, they said, we never go. We're Jews, and we never go through Samaria. Jesus said, I do. So we went down, and here at the well of Sychar, and this was about noon at that time, and this lady had come down, and she came at noon, because at noon the women wouldn't come. The women hated her. She was a prostitute. And she would probably, all of the husbands had known her in a very derogatory manner. So she sat down, and then she began to say, you're a stranger here. Aren't you a Jew? I said, I am. She said, the Jews don't talk to Samaritans. I said, how come you do? Well, she said, I have something to say. He said, give me a drink. And you would ask me to give you a drink? Well, Jesus said, if you knew who you were talking to, you'd ask me for a drink. Well, he said, you don't even have a cup in your hand. What are you talking about? Well, Jesus said, I have the living water. And if you drink my water, you'll never be thirsty again. She said, you know, give me some of that living water. And she says, you're talking like the Messiah. And you know what Jesus said? I am he. Well, then she left her water pot. She forgot all about the drink. She ran off. She ran into the city. And she told, especially the men, probably woke them out of their noon nap, and said, come and meet a man that told me everything that I've ever done. Well, you can imagine they came quickly, and probably all the women did too. And they had a big crowd that came down. And you know what? The men said, we came because of what you said, but now we're staying because of what he said. Jesus spent several days there, and they had a mighty, mighty revival in Sychar. This amazing Jesus. I hope that you know him. If you don't know this amazing Jesus, it is so simple. You just have to say, Jesus, you're amazing because you died for me. If I'd have been the only one in the world, you would have died for me. Jesus, I want you to come into my heart and into my life. Forgive me of my sins. I take you as my Lord and as my Savior. And if you've done that, you will know this amazing Jesus. Amazing grace. That saved a wretch like me. Polston, the life that wins.